My daughter sent me to jail for 5 months. She planted heroin in my house to protect her drugs. But when she confessed everything and got sentenced to 8 years, my wife still defended her. I'm 47 years old. I've been working construction since I was 18, and what I'm about to tell you completely destroyed my life, my marriage, and basically any faith I had in family. My daughter, Brittany, sent me to jail. Not by accident, not by misunderstanding, but she literally planted drugs in my house and called the police to blame me for her own crimes. I spent 5 months locked up for something I didn't do. And when I got out and the truth came out, my wife, Brittany's mother, still found a way to keep defending her. But let's start from the beginning, because this story is long and complicated, and I need you to understand how we got to this point. Brittany was always difficult, since she was little. She wasn't a bad kid exactly, but there was something, an attitude, a way of defying everything that made raising that girl exhausting. When she hit adolescence, things got worse, much worse. She started hanging out with people I knew weren't good for her, guys older than her, kids who had already dropped out of school and were into sketchy stuff. My wife always said it was just a phase, that all teenagers go through that we had to give her space and trust her. I wasn't so sure, honestly, but I didn't want to be the authoritarian father who pushes his daughter further away with a heavy hand, you know what I mean? I tried talking to her, tried setting reasonable boundaries, but Brittany just wouldn't listen. At 16, she dropped out of school. Just like that, one day she told us she wasn't going back and we couldn't make her. And technically, she was right. We couldn't physically drag her to school every day, my wife cried. I got angry. We had horrible fights at home. But Brittany didn't change her mind. Things got worse when she met this guy, some Jason or something. I never bothered to really learn his name because from the first moment I knew he was trash. This guy was like 23 years old, Brittany barely 17, and that alone seemed suspicious to me. He'd come pick her up in this beat-up car, wouldn't even get out to say hello to us, just honked the horn and she'd run out. I told my wife we had to do something, that this guy wasn't a good influence, but she kept saying the same thing as always, that Brittany needed to make her own mistakes, that if we pushed too hard she'd rebel more. Well, turns out my wife was right about one thing. Brittany did rebel more. So much that one day she just disappeared. She left with that guy, and we didn't hear anything from her for 3 complete years. 3 years. Can you imagine? We filed a missing person report, but she was technically an adult, so the police couldn't do much. Every birthday, every Christmas, every normal day, I'd think about where she was, if she was okay, if she was even alive. My wife got really depressed during those years. She'd cry at night, look at old photos of Brittany, kept her room exactly how she'd left it like she might come back any moment. I was devastated too, obviously, but I was also angry. Angry at Brittany for doing this to us. Angry at that guy who took her away. Angry at myself for not being able to prevent it somehow. We kept going with our lives because we had no other choice. I worked. My wife worked. We tried to fill the void Brittany left, but we never really could. And then, one day about 2 years ago, Brittany showed up at our door. She was skinny, haggard, with horrible dark circles and dirty clothes. She said Jason had left her, that she had nowhere to live, that she needed help. My wife immediately hugged her, cried, told her of course she could stay, that this was her home. I wasn't so convinced, honestly. Something about the way Brittany looked, how she talked, made me suspect there was more to the story than she was telling us. But my wife begged me to give her a chance, that she was our daughter, that family has to stick together in difficult times. I agreed, but I set conditions. I told Brittany she could stay if she looked for work, if she helped around the house, if she acted like a responsible adult. She said yes to everything, that she'd learned her lesson, that she just needed a little time to get back on her feet. Well, turns out all of that was a lie. Brittany didn't look for work, not a single day. She'd get up at noon, stay in pajamas all day looking at her phone or sleeping, and at night she'd go out until who knows what hours. She didn't help with anything in the house, didn't buy food with our money that my wife supposedly gave her for that, didn't clean her room that smelled horrible. I started suspecting she was using drugs again, or still, because there were obvious signs. Red eyes, erratic behavior, The fact that she always needed money but never had anything to show for that money. I talked to my wife about this, but she didn't want to listen. She said I was too hard on Brittany, that the girl was going through a difficult time and needed our unconditional support. After like 6 months of this, I couldn't take it anymore. Brittany wasn't making any effort to improve her situation. She was just using our house as a free hotel while doing who knows what at night. One day, we had a horrible argument because she came home at 5 in the morning making noise and woke me up. I had to get up at 6 to go to work. I told her she needed to get a job and contribute or leave the house. She yelled at me that I was a bad father, that I'd always hated her, that it was my fault she'd left with Jason in the first place. I told her that was ridiculous, that she made those decisions and now had to accept the consequences. The argument got really ugly. My wife got involved trying to calm things down, but I was fed up. I gave Brittany an ultimatum. 24 hours to decide if she was staying and following the rules or leaving. That night, Brittany went out as usual and didn't come back until late. The next day in the afternoon, I was in the garage fixing some tools. When the police arrived, 2 patrol cars, 4 officers, with a search warrant, they said they'd received an anonymous tip that I was keeping drugs in the house. I froze. Literally couldn't process what was happening. I told them there had to be a mistake, that I'd never used drugs in my life, that they could search whatever they wanted. And they searched. Boy, did they search. They tore the house apart looking, and then one of the officers yelled from my room. They found multiple bags of heroin hidden under my bed, in my closet, behind my drawers. These weren't small amounts. It was like 10 bags, enough for them to think I was distributing them. They arrested me right there. They put handcuffs on me in front of my neighbors who came out to see what was happening. They read me my rights while I screamed that it wasn't mine, that someone had planted them. My wife was hysterical, crying, saying there had to be a mistake. And Brittany was standing there in her bedroom doorway, watching everything with an expression I'll never forget. It wasn't surprise, it wasn't fear. It was almost like satisfaction. Something about that look made me realize immediately what had happened, but it was already too late. They put me in the patrol car and took me away. At the station, they interrogated me for hours. I told them over and over that I didn't know anything about those drugs, that it had to be my daughter, that she was involved in something bad and was blaming me. But they didn't believe me, or rather they couldn't do anything without evidence. The drugs were in my room, in my house, found with a legal warrant. My public defender, because I didn't have money for a private one, told me the situation looked really bad. They denied me bail because the amount of drugs was enough to consider me a flight risk. They sent me to county jail to wait for trial. Those 5 months in jail were the worst of my life, and not just because of the obvious conditions of being locked up. It was the injustice of it all, knowing I was innocent and nobody believed me, knowing my own daughter had done this to me. My wife visited me a few times at first, but even she had doubts. I could see it in her eyes, in the way she asked questions like, "Are you sure you had nothing to do with this? Or was there something you weren't telling me?" That almost hurt more than the rest. The woman I'd been married to for 25 years doubted me. I begged her to investigate Brittany, to check her room, her phone. But she refused. She said Brittany was so affected by my arrest that she barely left her room, that she cried all the time. I knew those were lies, but I couldn't do anything from jail. The judicial system is shit when you're on the wrong side of it. My trial kept getting delayed because of problems with the court calendar, because there were more urgent cases, because my public defender had like 100 other cases and couldn't dedicate time to mine. Meanwhile, I stayed, locked up. I lost my job, obviously, lost everything. In jail, I tried to stay out of trouble, but I still had some confrontations. Nothing serious, but enough to make me realize this wasn't a place for me, that I didn't belong there. Then something happened that changed everything. The prosecutor assigned to my case, a young guy who seemed to still have some conscience, decided to investigate a bit more thoroughly. I don't know exactly what motivated him. Maybe something about my case didn't add up for him. Maybe he just had free time. I don't know. The thing is, he started reviewing the phone records from the house and asked permission to review the text messages of everyone living there, and that's where they found Brittany's messages. Complete conversations where she talked about selling drugs, getting clients, hiding her merchandise, messages with guys who were clearly distributors, plans to make deliveries, everything. They also found that none of my fingerprints were on the drug, bags, not my DNA, nothing that connected me physically to them. And several witnesses came forward saying they'd seen Brittany with known dealers in the weeks before my arrest. With all this new evidence, the prosecutor had no choice but to drop the charges against me. I got out of jail in February, after 5 months locked up. 5 months of my life I'll never get back. But the story doesn't end there because the worst was still to come. Brittany was arrested almost immediately. They found her in a horrible apartment on the other side of town, a place full of trash and used syringes, with more drugs and all the paraphernalia to distribute them. They gave her a drug test, and it came back positive for heroin, cocaine, and amphetamines. She was completely destroyed by drugs, unrecognizable from the girl she'd been. During the investigation, Brittany eventually confessed everything. She admitted the drugs were hers, that she'd hidden them in my room, that she herself had called the police, with the anonymous tip. Her plan was simple and twisted. If I was going to kick her out of the house, then she was going to make sure I paid for it. She also admitted she'd been stealing things from the house to sell them and buy drugs. Small things nobody had noticed were missing. The trial was quick, because with all the evidence and her confession, there wasn't much to discuss. They found her guilty of possession, intent to distribute, and filing false accusations. They sentenced her to 8 years in a drug rehabilitation center, which is basically a prison but with mandatory treatment. I got a restraining order against her immediately. I never want to see her again in my life. I don't want to know anything about her. I know that sounds harsh. I know she's my daughter, but what she did to me is unforgivable. She took 5 months of my life, destroyed my reputation in the neighborhood, almost ended my marriage, made me lose my job, all because I gave her a completely reasonable ultimatum to get a job or leave. A normal person would have gone out to look for employment, but Brittany decided the best solution was to send me to jail for her own crimes. And here comes the part that still has me full of rage. My wife, after everything that happened, after it was proven that I was innocent and that Brittany had deliberately framed me, still finds a way to defend her. She says Brittany was sick, that addiction isn't a crime but a disease, that as parents we have to support her in her recovery. I've told her 1,000 times, I don't care if she was sick or not, that what she did to me was an unforgivable betrayal, that she chose to protect her drugs instead of her own father. But my wife doesn't see it that way. She's been writing letters to Brittany at the rehab center, sending her money for commissary, visiting her when she can. And every time she does, it's like a stab wound for me. We had fight after fight about this. I told her she had to choose, either Brittany or me, because I couldn't stay married to someone who maintained contact with the person who sent me to jail. She said, I was being irrational, that she was her daughter and she couldn't just abandon her, that forgiveness is important. I told her forgiveness is for people who show remorse, and Brittany, according to my wife, hasn't even really apologized. She just says she was high and wasn't thinking clearly. That's not an apology, that's an excuse. We ended up separating about 6 months ago. I moved to an apartment on the other side of town. A small place, but enough for just me. The divorce is in process. It'll probably be final in a few months. 25 years of marriage ended because my wife can't accept that her daughter is a terrible person who did something unforgivable. Sometimes I wonder if I did the right thing, if I should have tried harder. But then I remember those nights in jail, the constant fear, the humiliation, the desperation of knowing I was innocent and not being able to do anything about it. And then I know I made the right decision. I got another construction job with a different company. They don't pay as well as the previous one, but it's something. I live alone. I don't talk to my wife more than necessary for the divorce papers, and I definitely have no contact with Brittany. My wife sends me messages from time to time telling me how Brittany is doing in rehab, how she's supposedly improving, and I just don't respond. I don't care. That person stopped being my daughter the moment she decided to destroy my life to save hers. People ask me if I'll ever forgive her, if when she gets out of the rehab center I'm going to give her another chance. The answer is no, never. There are things that simply aren't forgivable, and sending your innocent father to jail for 5 months is definitely in that category. I don't care if she was high, I don't care if she was desperate, I don't care if she now says she's sorry. Actions have consequences, and the consequence of what she did is that she no longer has a father. My wife, or ex-wife soon, can keep being her mother if she wants, can keep sending her little letters and telling her everything's going to be okay. But I'm done with all that. Done with Brittany, done with that marriage that clearly wasn't what I thought it was, done with the idea of family I had before all this. Sometimes, at night when I can't sleep, I think about how we got to this point. At what moment did Brittany become someone capable of doing something like this? Was it something we did wrong as parents? Or do some people just have something broken inside them from birth? I don't have answers, honestly, and I probably never will. The only thing I know is that my life split in two, the day the police knocked on my door with that search warrant, and the person I was before that day no longer exists. Now I'm someone who was in jail, someone who was betrayed by their own blood, someone who lost their entire family. And there's no going back from that. No matter how much time passes or how many apology letters Brittany eventually writes, the damage is done, and it's permanent. Brittany gets out of the rehab center in like 6 more years if she has good behavior. I don't know what she's going to do when she gets out, and honestly, I don't care. Probably my ex-wife will receive her with open arms, will get her a place to live, will give her another chance. And probably Brittany will fall back into drugs because that's what addicts do, especially the ones who never really accept responsibility for what they did. But that's not my problem anymore. It's not my life anymore. It has nothing to do with me. I'm going to move forward. I'm going to work. I'm going to live my quiet life in my small apartment, and I'm going to try to rebuild some of what Brittany destroyed. It's not going to be easy. I still have nightmares about jail. I still get anxious when I see patrol, cars. I still feel rage every time I think about all this. But it is what it is, and I have to keep going because I have no other choice. Life went on after Brittany sent me to jail, and it's going to go on now without her at all.